I'll give you one clue what we're making this week. This is the way. Let's go. Hey, how's it going? Anthony Fro here, Crate Sci-Fi. Today's exciting. Today I'm going back into the Mandalorian universe. We're gonna make the Disruptor Rifle. And the reason I'm able to do that is because of 3D printing, but also because Rob PAUZA has this awesome model, and he has a lot of models on my mini factory, but he also has a YouTube video of his build, right? So I'll definitely link to his model, I'll link to his build. Big shout out to him. What's exciting about this to me is the Mandalorian is my favorite, and the reason why is because I tend to, rather than do sort of fan service where it's like making things from franchises, everything I make, like I always say, is for typically for films that I create, right? I like inventing my own things, creating my own things, inspired by all these sort of great franchises. But the thing about the Mandalorian and Star Wars in general is just the design, right? When I show you that, you know what that is, and then that just speaks for the, every single piece of this world. And I mean, it's a stretch, but like Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, probably was what most people know him from, and his crazy antics. But he famously retyped Hemingway and Fitzgerald novels, like the whole entire thing, right, page by page. And he's said that he wanted to feel what it was like to write a masterpiece. And I kind of feel that way, like when I do these type of builds. It's like, this is homage to something that I didn't create, but it's definitely going to inform and make me better when I make my own things, right? So enough about that. So it's definitely a lot of printing, and then we're going to have a big sanding party here. Have all these parts that I've been printing. Anytime you see me do a 3D printing video, know that it's a cooking show, right? It's like, oh, here's the turkey after it's been in the oven for 8 hours, but here it is in 2 minutes, right? So, but that is what it is. So, why am I procrastinating? Because I have a lot of sanding to do. So let's get into it. All right, so let's buckle up. It's going to be a long ride. All right, so here I have all my parts. Now, this was a print that was supposed to be one piece that I had to cut into two. So, we got to deal with it. And, in the big picture, that's not that big of a deal. Everything else printed pretty much as it was supposed to. So here I'm just sort of leveling out the sides because we're going to marry them together. There is going to be a little bit of a gap, but I want to tooth it up so the glue will stick, and then this way we can have sort of a more even surface. But I don't want to go too deep because this is, it's made to a certain size, right? So I want all the other components to fit. So here, pretty much for this entire build, I'm using 5-minute epoxy. You just want that dry time to just make fine adjustments. And then here, this is the tube that the whole thing hangs on. So also we use that as a jig throughout this process, right? So that way I know that it's all lined up and everything is going to fit properly because I have that piece of tube that is the size of the final tube. So now I know this will work. So before I do some finishing on this, I just want to clean it off with some isopropyl. And to fill up this gap, I could use bondo, but it's a pretty fine gap and it's pretty uniform, so I'm going to use the baking soda trick. So what this is you just put some super glue and then you press some baking soda in there so it makes like a paste, and then that'll fill your crack and then you sand that off. Some people use baby powder. I just like the baking soda. And now we're just sort of dealing with this gap, right? And this is because I had to split this to print. If you have a bigger volume on your printer, you won't have to go through this step, right? But, that's looking pretty good. And with the super glue, you can do it right away instead of having to wait, for bondo or something to dry. Here I'm test fitting all the pieces on that jig. Everything's looking good. So now we go into the sanding, right? Lots and lots of sandings. And I even made this like video montage because it was just so much footage of sanding that, you know, you get the idea, but this kind of gives you an overview of all the sanding that you have to do to all these parts. But this is always a part of it, right? So sanding, I think that took me a better part of a day, right? So now we have, this is the main piece of the Disruptor Rifle, right? This is the part that I just love even working on this piece. When I'm working on this piece, it's like, yeah, I don't know. There's just something about the design of this stuff that gets you excited. So here again, because of my print volume, I had to do this into 2 segments, and you can see the line there because this had to be printed as 2 pieces, right? So now I got everything sort of sanded and, you know, sort of lined up. And now I'm going to address that seam, right? So that's sanded. First, I'm going to, let me backtrack a little. First, I'm going to make this stronger with some super glue. So what happened off camera, because this is all print lines, I think if you look at that close, you can see how there's like the print lines. I had a piece of this snap off. So I figured it was probably prone to snap off because it is sort of a thin piece. So what I'm doing here is I'm painting the whole thing in super glue just to give it a more a rigid frame, right? So now I'm going to hit that with the primer after I painted it with the super glue. Now it's really strong now, but I have this seam. So I have the air drying, the spot putty. We're going to put that in the gap where I had to put the 2 pieces together. And that's, you know, when you do the gray primer, that really helps to show you the parts that are going to be a problem, right? I mean, in the end, we're going to weather this, but you don't want a seam that's clearly a seam of building, right? If something looks like it's beat up, then maybe I let it go. But when it's just a straight seam that's like, oh, okay, this is a manufacturing thing, then, you know, we have to clean that up. And yeah, that's looking really good. It's a lot stronger now with that super glue sort of coating on there. And now, with the odd shapes of this, I tend to lean more into the sanding sponge because it really helped me. So while all that was going on, I was printing out the back stock. The stock was huge, right? It took me 4 pieces. So the whole time I was doing all that sanding for a couple days, this was printing in the background, right? So just trying to maximize my time, right? So, you know, where the print sits on the bed, you have to clean up that edge. So here I'm just cleaning up the pieces. You know, Rob's file is you could do it in 2 pieces, and then if you have a smaller printer, you could do it in 3, and mine was even a little smaller than that, so I had to do it in 4, right? So here I am, you know, the same process. We're cleaning these up, and then Rob created these sort of biscuits that allow you to align everything together, right? So I'm getting the alignment on other pieces, and again, because, you know, it's on the print bed there, you get that gap, but we're going to deal with that, right? And even if I didn't have the small print volume, I still would have done it in 2 or 3 pieces, so I would have had to do this anyway. So it's just, you know, you're doing it 2 times instead of 1, I guess. So 5-minute epoxy, making sure all my parts fit, get out the squeeze out. The squeeze out, you want to see that squeeze out because then you know you have full coverage. And here, so there's a hole in this that's going to accept one of the rods, right, of the rifle. And you want to just make sure that that's all lined up so that when you finally put the thing together, it all fits up, right? So there, you know, it's looking, I don't know, it reminds me of like a cartoon fish bones. So here I'm sanding, and actually there's still one more piece printing in the background, and there it is, right? So that's the final piece, finally. So now same thing, right? A lot of repetition in this because it's such a big piece, right? It's like 4 times the size and work of the stuff that we mostly do, right? So another biscuit, more 5-minute epoxy. And again, the 5-minute epoxy, I can't stress enough just what a great solution that is when you're doing work like this, because you just need, You don't want to wait forever for it to dry, but you do need that extra couple minutes just to massage things. And you see there I have the rod in the stock to make sure everything fits. Now this, I won't be able to get away with that super glue trick. I have to use Bondo because these gaps are pretty deep, and you know, like I said, it's the cartoon fishbone. So, you know, I have a respirator on there, and you know, this stuff is pretty nasty, but Bondo with the ABS, it's sort of the perfect storm, right? Like this is gonna sand out really nicely. So here I'm just putting on the Bondo, and you know, if you follow my channel, you know I'm ashamed of how sloppy my Bondo is, but it's getting better. So first thing I'm gonna do, I have like this really sort of raspy file that I'm just going to chunk off, you know, all of these sort of gloppy pieces, right? We just want to sort of hog it out. You know, we want to get off these sort of big clumps, and it's a process, you know. So a lot of the work on this rifle was just sort of tucking in, right? There's no shortcuts. So here I have a really low grit sandpaper. It's like a 60, I think. And then now I'm going to hog out the rest of this, but you know, that sanding palm piece that I have there, that's actually like a foam rubber. So again, with these organic shapes, it's nice to have something soft like that. It's almost like a spongy latex, right? So now I'm going in with my 220 and my 500. And again, I take scrap pieces of foam with these organic shapes. A sanding block, you know, is not really useful, right? So, and also too, you know, I watch a lot of maker channels. I've been watching a channel with a guy who fixes old guitars, and he does a lot of the sandings with his fingers, which I'm doing here. And he kind of convinced me that it's kind of a good thing to do because you can feel with your fingers, oh, that's a little high, and you press a little harder. And so, yeah, you know, you can get inspiration from all sources. So that is looking really good. So now I'm doing the 500 grit and the sponge, and yeah, so I'm going to hit it here with the primer because I think we are onto something. And look at that, right? I can't even see those seam lines. Very happy with the way that turned out. So now is that fine spot putty work that I was talking about earlier. I'm just going to take a pencil here and you know, just going to mark out. You can't even see them on camera here, I don't think, but it's like just little pinholes and maybe like a little scratch where I went too deep. And then here, this is something I've never done before. I sort of just tossed aside the tool and I started rubbing this in with my finger. And I was like, you know what? This is actually working better, and I'll probably from now on just do this with my finger. And here, you know, through the magic of editing, it's probably about an hour later. And now I'm sanding off that spot putty again with the sponge. And then this is like sort of the final primer, right? This is the primer that's going to seal everything before we paint it. And yeah, it's worth just taking another look at that. I mean, that's 4 pieces, right? And I thought that came out pretty good. All right, so now we're going to start gluing it all together. More epoxy, more parts. And what I find is helpful, you're not seeing this in the video, but off camera, it's like I always tend to rehearse the next sort of bit of business that I'm about to do, right? If I'm going to glue something together, before I glue it, I'll just sort of go through the process in my head, right? And like even here, like I'm fitting up all the pieces. If you notice, I haven't glued it yet, right? It's like I'm just taking note in my head. All right, this piece first, then that piece. And this was really helpful. You know, like I said, I'll link to Rob's video. You know, he gives like a lot of good pointers of putting this together, and this is one of them where he talks about how you're supposed to put these pieces together. So now this is the scope. I'm going to get these ready. And anywhere where you see I have the tape there, that's because I want to keep it sort of rough for the glue, right? So here, this is the part that glues together. That part with the tape is not going to be glued yet. And when I hit it with the primer, I want to keep that the raw plastic so that when I do put it together, it has something to grab onto. And there, I just sort of spin that in there. And then here's like this handle grip piece, and here's all the main pieces glued together, right? So here, you know, Punish Props, Bill Duran kind of got me in this habit is, you know, just take a minute to build a rig when you're painting stuff. Like that little dowel stand to paint stuff, just makes it so much easier. Yeah, it took me like 15 minutes to screw that together, but wow, the pieces come out better, and then it's just worth it, right? So that's there in my backyard drying. So here's the piece of PVC pipe that this hangs on. Now, in Rob's original build, he used graphite rods, which I couldn't find because I think everybody bought them up. For the smaller rod, I have the graphite one, but for the larger one, I had to go with this PVC pipe, which is fine. I just had to cut it down, but it's, I think, just a little, just like a hair thicker than what the actual carbon fiber rod was. So here, even though I would sand it down anyway, just so that it'll accept the glue and the paint better, I go just a little further just to give myself a little bit of wiggle room, because these parts go on here really tight, and that's just a testament to how well Rob designed this. So here is that paint that I discovered on my last blaster build. I'm going to paint that stock off camera with that. And then now, oh yeah, more sanding. But this is the enjoyable sanding, right? This is the like primarily 500 grit, 220 would work. And here's where I'm sanding it right before I paint it. And what's nice about this is when you're sanding at this stage, you're just, the piece is almost like glass, right? So it's sort of rewarding. So here, like I mentioned earlier, you know, I'm doing these odd shapes with my finger. I can feel the spots, and then I have that soft foam palm sander, and you know, I'm just vamping now because it's just more sanding. All right, so there I just cleaned off my hands, and this is tack cloth. And right before I do the final paint job, because that was the last sanding, you take this tack cloth, and it just gets all the dust off of there, and it just gets it ready for paint. Because you spend all that time sanding, you want to make sure that you get a good first coat down, right? So now I'm doing the final glue up, right? And this is a little nerve-wracking, and off camera, you can't really tell here, but because it was such a tight fit onto this PVC pipe, I had some problems, right? So there I corrected it. I don't think you could tell, but one of my pieces broke. But you know, you're gluing everything together on this jig, on this PVC rod, so it's fine. It all glued back together. But yeah, that's why you rehearse, right? Because it's a tight fit. So same thing here. So now I'm gonna glue on the scope, and you know, you're watching this how-to video that is condensed so that it's watchable. But you know, I just want you to, I want to mention this. Keep in mind, like now I'm just, you know, putting it together, but I probably, you know, danced around it for 5 minutes before I do the final glue up, because you just want to make sure everything's lined up right? So I'm not really showing you that for the sake of moving along the video, but every one of these pieces I glue on, you know, you just take a moment, and then you always like double check, like, okay, I'm gluing this, is this piece go here? And then even, you know, so the next piece is just about, I don't know, like 10 millimeters away from where that scope is, and that's why I put that piece of tape there, just to give myself something to aim for. And then now, you know, all these rods are threading together, and it's, you know, it's just, you know, I think I've said this 10 times already, it's just a really great design. And you see there how all the pieces work together, and it's so satisfying, because all of those pieces are just small little prints that I had been printing all week, right? So the stock and the hand grip I'm going to do with Plastidip, like I like to do, but here I'm just putting a little masking, because these sort of little plates, I want these to stay that sort of flat black. And then those little rivets, it'll be nice if those don't have the Plastidip on them, because it'll give it like a dual like light reflection thing. It'll reflect light differently. Subtle, but pretty awesome. So now got to make sure that the trigger fits. And with a lot of these pieces, because, you know, 2 coats of primer, a couple coats of paint, it's such a tight tolerance on the fit, you know, it doesn't fit anymore, right? So you got to do some sanding. Make sure you test it before you commit to the glue, because, you know, again, like I said, this is all sped up, but that trigger probably in real time took me about 15 minutes to sort of fine sand it and get it to a place where it would just pop in, right? So I want to make sure that you take note of that, so you don't just think like, okay, print that, pop it in. It's like off camera. See right there, I just popped it in, but I had practiced that probably 5 times and it probably didn't fit like 3 of the times. All right, so there, and then you see like, I got a little messy with the glue there. All right, so this is the only thing that wasn't part of Rob's kit. Somebody made this as an afterthought, and it's the hex barrel, because he designed his, I think, before the show even came out. So a lot of things were, he had to sort of guess. And this is really the only thing that I added that wasn't part of his package, was this hex file for the barrel. But I'm really glad I did it. And there you can see, all the time while I'm building this, I'm like, geez, I can't even fit it in the frame. I'm stepping back in my shop. And then here we're just going to take a little walk down all these parts. And again, it's like, wow, this thing's huge. It's like almost as tall as me. So now I'm going to go ahead and now this last sanding is just a cleanup, right? Where all the glue is, where I had some glue that I didn't get off, or it sort of seeped out, right? Had some squeeze out. And it's just sort of like a last minute, like, okay, let me just touch all this up. But yeah, you're taking it this far, just, glue. Glue gets in places where you don't even realize it. And then now, before I put my final coat of paint, I'm going to go again with the tack cloth. Just really taking my time with this piece. Like some pieces, you go down and dirty. Some of them, like, you really want to make it nice. So here's, I'm just going to primer the whole thing, right? So now that's all primered, and then I'm going to hit the whole thing with this black coat. So this is going to be a base coat and sort of the final coat. For some of the pieces, it's the base. For some, it's the final. So now I'm going to do a dry brush, just a silver dry brush on all these main components that are the body of the gun, right? Because this is not screen accurate to the show. This is my version, right? And I'm calling it my blackout rifle, right? So I'm just doing the black metallic just to bring this to life. And what I've been doing is just go a little heavy on that. And I'm going to hit that with a clear just to sort of get that so it doesn't get all blended up with our next layers. Here I'm just lightly sanding the stock because, like I said, that's just a base coat. And I'm masking this stock off, and then I'm going to mask off that sort of middle hand grip on the barrel, because I'm getting ready. I like to do the grips, as you know, if you follow my channel, with the plastic dip. And like I say, the reason for that is it has a nice feel because it's the grips, but it also reflects light differently. And I really like that effect, right? So here I'm just using some butcher paper, because, this is another thing that I've probably said, a dozen times on this channel. It's better to mask everything off, to take the time to do that, even though it's like way down where you'll never hit. Because sometimes if you just get that tiny bit of overspray, it's just really, really a pain to deal with and just not worth it. And then there you see how nice that plastic dip looks, right? And then by now there's, I don't know, like 4 or 5 coats of paint on there, so those bondo seams are really gone. Now with the plastic dip, what I learned the hard way is it kind of grabs onto the masking tape too. So what I always do with the plastic dip is I take the knife and I go over the seams that I masked, so that when you pull it off, it'll tend to grab, and it's like almost like pulling gum off a shoe, right? So you want to make sure that you have a clean break line where you want it to come away with the masking tape. And I'm just doing that here. And you're catching a glimpse, right, of what I like about sort of that dual tone, right? It's like you have that matte black grippy plastic dip, and you see how it's just a little different, right? All right, so now the final touch is a couple of the pieces I'm going to do the graphite treatment, right? And I'm excited about this because this I've never done before. Like, I've done the graphite treatment many, many, many times on this channel, but this is the first time I'm just doing it as an element, right? And I thought about this, I gave this some thought, while I was building it over a couple days. I thought about it. I'm like, okay, I want to do sort of that blaster tip I want to do this sort of stop sign piece over here and the scope, right? So I have to hit that with a base coat of gloss for the graphite to do its thing. So I'm keeping this all masked off. And again, I have to go over this with the knife because usually with the masking, before it's dry, I peel that off. But because I let this sit overnight, I just make a line to make sure that it all comes apart. And then here's the graphite, right? Really simple, really effective. Just rubbing graphite on here and then like polishing it in. And then there you can really see the difference, right? And then here, this is my favorite part, like the fork, like, wow, right? That's so satisfying. So again, right, just these few components, and now demasking that where the graphite, otherwise that graphite will get everywhere, right? So I was very careful. Once I was done doing the graphite off camera, I cleaned off all the dust with a vacuum just so that I wasn't getting graphite everywhere. And that two-tone right there really pops. Like, I really like that right on the tip. That's one of those small details, but it's those small details like that that really just sort of pop, right? It's like not in the main focus, but right, you see how the light's reflecting like 3 or 4 different ways there. So now the weathering. So for my first pass of weathering, I like to use the water-based oil paints. And what I typically do is the black, I do like a sludge wash, right? The black I like to go heavy with, pretty much over the whole thing, and then wipe that off. And in my mind, that's like the grease, right? Whenever you see like an old engine, it has like that grime in it, and I'm trying to achieve that. With the brown, that's where I go a little thicker, not so much of a wash, and I get like splotchy with that. For me, the brown is more just a art thing. Like, I want to break up that black, right? So I'm just doing like random blotches of the burnt sienna, actually. And with this, I don't wipe it off because it'll smear everything and give it like a brown. This I just pat off, right? So once it's all dry, it's just very subtle, but it breaks up the piece. Now this, I hit all of this with a clear coat. And what I did there off camera is that aluminum foil is over all of my graphite parts because I don't want to dull that shine. And then here is just a blue anodized paint, just to give it that sort of metallic heated up look, just a little dusting of that. And then for the final pass, I like to do the weathering powders. To me, this is like, so the other stuff was the engine grease. This is like the dirt, the earth, right? So I just put the powders, basically I just put them in all the crevices, just going by with my shop vac to get rid of all that. Maybe someday I'll have like compressed air in the shop. And then now I'm just getting rid of this with a clean paper towel, just being careful. I don't want to smear it everywhere, but you know, I don't want it to be all clumped up. And yeah, that's looking really good. And yeah, there's the beauty shots. And let me tell you, it was not easy to get a full frame picture of that. But man, yeah, really happy with that, right? And you know, not screen accurate to the show, but that's not what I was going for. Because to me, the Mandalorian, the best part of it is that it's like my Mandalorian's character. He's got a blackout disruptor rifle, right? Just all those details look really, really cool. Great model by Rob PAUZA. Yeah, and just that little bit of heat distortion, right? That little bit of blue really helps to sell it. And then, oh, it's so mean looking. Really happy with this piece. I can't even fit it in the frame. Look at that thing. Oh my gosh, so happy with this. And it was, you know, it was a lot of work, but not difficult work. Just, this is like 4 times the size of anything I build. So it took 4 times as long. And it was really rewarding, really exciting, great model. Big shout out, thank you to Rob PAUZA for creating this model. I'll link to his model. He also does his own YouTube video where he shows you how to put it together. So I'll link to that as well. And man, totally worth it. And you know, I've been 3D printing for a little while now, and I can say that what's awesome about Rob's stuff is his files are solid, right? Sometimes you get a little weirdness you got to deal with. These were rock solid. Oh, it doesn't even fit. Now, with everything that's going on in the world right now, you know, never say never. I have no interest in doing fan fiction, fan films, but never say never. I'm thinking I'm gonna do a Mandalorian quick, like, little fan film. I can get an actor in a Mandalorian costume, myself and the DP, that's it. You know, we'll get tested or whatever, do what we gotta do and just go out and shoot some Mandalorian stuff. So let me know what you think about that idea. So I think I'm gonna be doing some more Mandalorian builds. And I know there's a few of you that are bummed about how much I've been leaning into 3D printing, but remember, this channel is Create Sci-Fi. And as part of creating sci-fi, right now I'm 3D printing. You know what I mean? It's new to me, it's exciting. I'm still gonna do the other stuff, but for now, you know, I'm learning how to do this and it's helping me to create sci-fi, right? Which is what we're all about, low cost, high impact. So I guess the only thing left to do with this now is to fire it up. I mean, geez, how do you, all right, oh, okay. Why is, oh, right. This is the Disruptor Rifle, right? Okay. Put that in there. All right, here we go. Whoa! Man! Oh, so much fun. Well, as always, I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Love to read the comments. Be sure to check out the merch shop. Buying the merch really helps, you know, practicing what I preach. On Etsy, I got a Mando hat. Always supporting creators. And remember, I'm just here to help make sci-fi.